Have you ever felt a truly complex, overwhelming emotion?
Oh, absolutely.
Like perhaps a profound sense of grief, but it's somehow mixed with a strange, quiet relief, or a massive surge of joy that was tinged with absolute terror.
A very specific, very human blend.
Yes,
Yes.
right. But then when you actually tried to explain it to a friend over a pint at the pub, the words just made it sound absolutely small. Trivial, even.
They flatten it out completely.
Exactly. You sit there listening to your own voice thinking, well, that isn't it at all. That sounds like a cheap greeting card, and what I'm actually feeling is a hurricane.
It's a remarkably common frustration.
Or, and I know you'll relate to this,
Yeah.
perhaps you've been sitting in a terribly long corporate meeting, one of those endless strategy sessions,
Oh, the agony, yes.
and you suddenly realize that everyone around the mahogany table is using the exact same bespoke buzzwords.
Synergy, agile, bandwidth.
Paradigm shift, yes. But nobody from the managing director down is actually saying anything real.
Just pushing empty air around the room.
Spot on. So if you are nodding your head right now, perhaps feeling a bit seen, you are going to want to settle in, put the kettle on, and truly prepare yourself for this one.
It is a hefty topic today.
It is indeed. Welcome to our deep dive. Today, our mission is to completely flip how you view the very words you speak, write, and think every single day.
It is a profound realization, isn't it? That haunting feeling of words failing us is something we universally tend to blame on our own individual shortcomings.
We do, don't we?
We sit there at the pub or at our desks and we think, if only I were more articulate, if only I had read more classic literature, I could explain this internal hurricane perfectly.
Just a lack of vocabulary on our part.
Exactly. But the source material we are examining today suggests something entirely different and, frankly, far more unsettling.
I was genuinely gobsmacked when I first read it.
It's brilliant. We are looking at a deeply philosophical essay by a Vietnamese thinker titled Ngona La Chok Lung Kampit, which translates to language as the necessary cage.
The necessary cage.
Right. And what makes this particular essay so gripping is that it isn't just some dry academic critique of grammar. It is a fundamental deconstruction of human reality.
Yeah.
The author presents the rather daunting idea that the problem isn't your vocabulary. The problem is the very nature of language itself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because reading through this essay, the central paradox it presents is quite simply staggering.
It forces a complete mental shift.
It does. I always naturally assumed, as I imagine you do listening to this, that language is just a handy tool, a utility we just pick up when we need to pass a message along.
Like a hammer or a spanner.
Exactly. We intuitively think of it as a mirror, right? A clear, polished glass mirror that passively reflects the objective reality of the world.
You see a mug, you say mug.
I see a ceramic mug on my desk, I say mug. The mirror reflects the mug. Job done. Full stop.
But it's not a mirror.
No. The essay argues that it is not a mirror at all. It is actually a lens. It is a curved, tinted piece of glass that we are permanently looking through.
And whilst it certainly helps us see the world, it fundamentally, inescapably distorts the view.
That distinction between the mirror and the lens, that is the crux of the entire argument.
What's fascinating here is the illusion of control. We believe we wield language, but the essay posits that most of the time, language is actually using us.
Which is a slightly terrifying thought.
It is. It provides a pre-built, incredibly rigid architectural frame through which we are forced to view the entire universe.
Right.
And the great silent trick it plays on human cognition is that we inevitably mistake that artificial frame for reality itself.
We just forget the glass is there.
Completely. We forget we were looking through a tinted lens, and we just assume that the distorted, linguistically shaped shadows we see are the actual absolute truth of the physical world.
I suppose the immediate temptation here for anyone listening is to think, well, this sounds a bit like an incredibly high-level university philosophy seminar.
It can sound a bit abstract at first glance.
Yeah. You might be wondering why this matters when you've got a massive presentation to finish by Tuesday, or you're just trying to untangle your own messy internal thoughts after a long week.
But it is intensely practical.
It really is. Understanding this, what the author beautifully and somewhat terrifyingly calls this soft prison of language, is arguably the ultimate shortcut to clearer thinking.
Because it's about realizing when the cage is protecting you and when it is blinding you to the truth of a situation.
Spot on. So to really grasp the architecture of this cage, we have to look at how it was built, which means looking at the rather unglamorous origins of human speech.
Yes.
Because I think we all harbor this terribly romantic notion of how language started.
We certainly do. There is a pervasive, almost poetic tendency to look back at the origins of human communication and imagine early hominids sitting around a crackling campfire.
Gazing at the stars.
Right. Suddenly inventing words because they desperately wanted to share deep truths about the cosmos, or perhaps to express the burgeoning stirrings of romantic love.
We treat it as the deliberate leap toward enlightenment.
Exactly. We treat language as the ultimate pinnacle of civilization. But the essay strips all that romanticism away and brings us crashing back down to a much rougher, distinctly pragmatic reality.
It was a survival technology.
First and foremost, it is a tool of brute necessity.
But hold on, surely there's an argument to be made that early language was born out of a genuine desire for social connection.
Naturally, humans are social creatures.
Right. Are we really saying that the entire foundation of human speech is devoid of that innate desire to just commune with one another? Is the author suggesting that's purely a romantic modern projection?
It's a fair point to raise, and social bonding is undeniably a massive part of primate behavior.
Hmm.
But the author's argument focuses on the catalyst for symbolic language.
The spark that ignited it.
Exactly. The catalyst wasn't a desire to compose sonnets. It was the harsh, unforgiving demands of the physical environment. Imagine a hunting party.
Okay, hunting a mammoth.
They aren't trying to express the beauty of the mammoth. They desperately need to coordinate an attack on the mammoth so the tribe doesn't starve when winter sets in.
It's purely tactical.
It started with a scout needing to scream a highly specific warning about a predator hidden in the tall grass. It started with a baby crying out for help so it wouldn't freeze.
The genesis of our vast lexicons was blunt.
It was functional. It was entirely about keeping the biological pulse beating for one more day in a world that was actively trying to kill us.
Right, so when you view it through that terribly stark lens, a rather cold truth emerges. Language, from its absolute inception, was never designed to describe reality accurately or comprehensively.
More beautifully.
Or beautifully, exactly. It was designed entirely to make collective behavior efficient. It operates as a filter.
A filter of priority.
Yes. When that early tribe was developing their rudimentary grunts and signals, they were essentially teaching the group what required their immediate life or death attention.
Danger. Food. Friend. Foe.
Those are the categories that matter when survival is on the line.
Precisely. And this is where the concept of the lens begins to take shape. Because a filter, by its very nature, must exclude things.
Right. If you're focusing on one thing, you're ignoring another.
If language is a spotlight illuminating danger and food, everything outside that spotlight is left in the dark. Whatever doesn't fit into those immediate, urgent categories simply gets pushed out.
Deemed unimportant.
It gets deemed biologically unimportant, or worse, it gets treated by the collective mind as if it simply doesn't exist. If there isn't a word for it, the tribe doesn't look for it. They don't process it.
That is genuinely quite eerie when you apply it to the present day. Think about what that means for you right now as you're listening.
It hasn't changed.
No. The language you and I inherited, this massive dictionary of English we use to navigate our lives, is still operating as that exact same survival filter.
It is an inherited system that actively selects what is allowed to enter our collective consciousness.
It's a bit like a highly judgmental bouncer at the door of reality, deciding which concepts get to come into the club and which ones are left out in the cold rain.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. And for thousands of years, that bouncer was only letting in things that were physically present.
News you could point that.
Exactly. But then, human language takes a massive, unprecedented evolutionary leap. It moves from being just an immediate reflexive signal, a panic shout when you actually see a tiger, to something entirely different.
The leap to the absent.
Yes, it becomes a system of abstracted signs and symbols. And this is the jump that changes absolutely everything about the human trajectory.
Because a sound stops being just a physiological reaction to what is right in front of your face.
It becomes an arbitrary symbol that represents something else entirely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because once a sound becomes a symbol, it allows humans to do something utterly magical, but also deeply troubling. We can suddenly talk about things that aren't there.
The creation of the absent, that is the philosophical term for it, and it is monumental.
It creates a whole new world.
Thanks to the symbolic nature of language, we construct what is effectively a second world. We have the immediate, tangible, physical world we can touch and smell, the rain, the dirt, the fire.
The stuff we bump into.
Exactly. But now, layered invisibly over it, is this second world of limitless possibilities. Because we have symbols, we can sit in a perfectly dry, safe cave and discuss tomorrow's rain.
We can formulate complex plans.
We can cultivate a profound fear of a winter storm that hasn't even arrived yet. We can debate the actions of an animal that ran away 3 days ago.
If you pause and connect this to your daily life, the implications are staggering. Just think about the sheer volume of human suffering that stems entirely from living inside this second symbolic reality.
It's immense.
I mean, how much time do you spend agonizing over an email you haven't even sent yet?
Or a conversation that might never happen.
Right. How often are you completely paralyzed by narratives about your own past stories you tell yourself about who you used to be? How often do you feel physically burdened by spoken promises, mortgages, or contracts?
We get so intensely tangled up in this symbolic world that we experience genuine physiological stress.
Our heart rate spikes, our palms sweat, our cortisol levels go through the roof, all over pure fictions, over concepts that do not exist in the physical room with us, over words.
It is a profound vulnerability unique to our species. A dog does not lie awake at night dreading a performance review.
Right.
But, as the essay rightly points out, we cannot simply condemn the second world because it is also the exact birthplace of all culture, all intellect, and all human progress.
It's a double-edged sword.
Without the ability to discuss the absent, there is no shared history. There is no scientific method which relies on hypothesizing about the unseen. There is no art.
So the cage begins to form its bars right here.
Yes. Our lives are no longer limited to what is immediately present in our field of vision, which is incredibly liberating, but simultaneously our reality becomes strictly bounded by what is sayable.
We expand our world infinitely, but we enclose ourselves within the borders of our vocabulary.
A brilliant way to put it.
That historical leap from instinct to symbol sets the stage for everything we are today. But humanity didn't stop there. We eventually decided to make this cage permanent.
The advent of writing.
Yes. We transitioned from spoken language, which the author beautifully describes as a flowing river, always moving, adapting, washing away, to the invention of the written word.
And if spoken language is a river, writing is the heavy iron mold that freezes it into a solid, unmoving object.
Freezing reality. That is precisely what the act of writing achieves.
It turns the ephemeral, vanishing spoken word into a tangible artifact that can survive the speaker. Suddenly, society possesses a stable, collective memory.
You no longer have to rely on the village elder remembering the exact details of the oral history.
You have it carved into a stone tablet or inked onto parchment.
But, and this is where the essay sharpens its critique, this monumental achievement immediately introduces a massive, inescapable power dynamic into human society.
Because whoever holds the pen gets to define what is official.
Exactly. It's a bit of a cheek, really, to assume that written history is objective when it was almost exclusively written by the victors, the wealthy, or the priesthood.
When something is written down, it gains a sudden, almost mystical, artificial weight. Laws, historical accounts, moral codes, ledgers of debt, definitions of sin.
They become real simply because they have been transcribed.
Think of the early scribes in Mesopotamia or Egypt. They wielded unimaginable power, even if the laws they were writing down were just the arbitrary preferences or prejudices of a specific powerful group of aristocrats.
Once those words were baked into clay, they took on the illusion of absolute divine truth.
Writing doesn't just record reality, it begins to actively dictate it. The highly subjective choice of the scribe becomes the unyielding objective reality of the entire society.
It's a brilliant con when you think about it. And we still fall for it today.
Oh, constantly.
We look at a historical document or a legal contract or a company handbook, and we instinctively think, well, it's in writing, it's printed, so it must be the natural, proper order of things.
We completely forget that some bloke, or a committee of blokes, just sat in a room one day and decided to write it exactly that way to suit their own interests.
Spot on. And as human societies grew larger, moving from tribes to city-states to massive empires, this need to freeze and control language became even more pronounced. The state needed to standardize it.
Standardization is the inevitable bureaucratic result of scale. If you are going to attempt to run a massive nation-state, collecting taxes across hundreds of miles, conscripting armies, enforcing laws...
You can't have 100 different local dialects interpreting your edicts differently.
Exactly. You need a singular standard language for your schools, for your administrative bureaucracy, and eventually for your mass media. You need everyone reading from the same page, literally and figuratively.
But the side effect of this is quite insidious. And we see it everywhere in British society, don't we? Society starts equating correct grammar and fluency with correct thinking.
A very dangerous assumption.
We unconsciously assume that if someone can speak smoothly, using the standard state-approved dialect, say, received pronunciation here in the UK, they must be inherently more intelligent, more rational, and more truthful.
We start to believe that a smoothly spoken lie is somehow truer than a clumsily expressed truth.
This is a vital point for anyone listening who wants to improve their critical thinking. We are conditioned to judge the linguistic packaging rather than the intellectual contents.
If an individual's experience is messy, complex, and difficult to articulate, perhaps a person from a marginalized background is struggling to explain a profound systemic injustice.
Or someone is trying to articulate a completely novel, outside-the-box idea.
Their clumsy, non-standard delivery is frequently dismissed as a lack of intellect. We effectively censor reality by demanding it be presented to us in a grammatically pleasing, standardized format.
And if that standardization was the great squeeze of the industrial age, let's bring it right up to the modern day, the digital era.
The digital squeeze.
Because the internet hasn't just inherited this language cage. It has compressed it to an absurd degree. It has put our language in a vice.
Now, communication isn't just standardized, it is completely, ruthlessly optimized for speed.
It's all clickbait titles, short tweets, viral memes, and 15-second video captions.
The digital squeeze is arguably the most profound shift in the cage since the printing press. The algorithms that govern our modern communication platforms are completely mathematically indifferent to nuance, depth, or truth.
They don't care about the hurricane.
Not at all. They are designed to prioritize engagement, which translates linguistically to opposition, rapid-fire conclusions, moral outrage, and easily digestible, highly polarizing labels.
So the immediate takeaway for you, listening right now, is this. If an idea is too complex, too nuanced, or too deeply human to fit the viral format, it dies. Full stop.
The format now wholly dictates the content of our shared reality.
We scroll through our feeds for hours, and we flatter ourselves into thinking we are taking in vast amounts of information, that we're becoming incredibly well-informed citizens of the world.
But more often than not, we are just reacting faster and faster to a series of pre-packaged, algorithmically selected linguistic labels.
We aren't engaging with physical reality. We are engaging with the algorithm's preferred syntax.
Which serves as the perfect bridge into the second major theme of the essay. We've established the historical scaffolding, how the cage was built over millennia to ensure survival, control, and efficiency.
Now, we must examine the interior of the cage.
Exactly. How does this soft prison actually function in our minds on a daily basis? How does the cognitive cage work?
And to understand that, we have to start with what the author calls the unnatural cuts of reality.
The unnatural cuts.
I have to say, this concept absolutely fundamentally shifted how I look at my living room. Because when you truly stop to think about it, the relationship between a word and a physical object is completely laughably arbitrary.
There is no natural link.
No. There is no universal divine law that dictates a piece of wood with 4 legs must be called a table. It's just a societal agreement. A massive historical gentleman's agreement that we all signed at birth without reading the terms and conditions.
The author employs a highly striking metaphor here. Language acts like a pre-sharpened butcher's knife that relentlessly slices up the continuous fabric of the world.
A butcher's knife.
Yes. And because we are born into a specific language, whether it's English, Mandarin, or Swahili, we grow up implicitly, unquestioningly believing that the universe naturally divided itself along those exact linguistic lines.
We suffer from a chronic case of confusing the map with the territory.
We assume reality came pre-sliced from the factory.
The source essay provides some utterly brilliant examples of how different languages map the exact same physical world in completely alien ways.
Take colors, for instance.
Right. English has distinct words for green and blue. But there are languages, like that of the Himba tribe in Namibia, which have multiple distinct words for shades of green that an English speaker couldn't even distinguish, whilst lacking a separate word for blue entirely.
Or look at Russian, which demands you distinguish between light blue, Goluboy, and dark blue, Sini, as completely separate colors, not just shades.
Or, tying it back to the essay's origins, look at family hierarchies. In English, I can just say, my brother.
But in Vietnamese, the pronoun system is incredibly complex and age-based.
You can't just say brother. The language forces you to specify if it is an older brother or a younger brother. It enforces a constant linguistic awareness of social hierarchy.
And the philosophical implication here is immense. When we proudly declare to each other that we are objectively describing reality, we are almost always deceiving ourselves.
We are merely describing our specific linguistic map.
We are describing the highly specific cuts our ancestors decided to make with that butcher's knife.
Let's go back to that table in my living room. Calling something a table is incredibly useful, obviously. I'm not suggesting we stop using nouns.
That would be a bit difficult.
It would be a nightmare. But the hidden danger is that the word artificially packages a deeply complex physical object into a neat, easily manipulatable cognitive unit.
The moment you look at it and your brain says table, you stop actually seeing it.
You stop seeing the intricate, swirling grain of the yolk. You forget the wobbly back leg. You completely ignore the fact that it was made from a tree that stood in a forest for 100 years, absorbing sunlight and rain.
You forget the echoes of the family dinners eaten upon it.
The label table brutally deletes all that deeper, messy complexity, so your busy brain can just say, flat wooden surface, put my coffee there, and move on.
It forces a necessary but ultimately false simplification of the universe. And while vocabulary provides the neat little labels for the boxes, the deepest, most invisible, and most powerful part of the cage is actually grammar.
This is where the essay gets truly forensic in its analysis.
It argues that we don't just speak in sentences. Our very thoughts are fundamentally constrained by sentence structures.
I want to spend some real time on this because the bias of grammar is a concept that genuinely forces you to reevaluate how you argue.
It's foundational.
Let's look in the standard subject-verb-object structure, the SVO structure, which dominates English. The boy at the ball, the CEO ruined the company, the storm destroyed the house.
We are so incredibly used to this rhythm, we don't even perceive it as a choice.
But the essay argues that this grammatical structure violently forces us to view the entire universe as a simplistic stage of linear cause and effect. It demands relentlessly that we answer the question, who did what to whom?
If we unpack the broader implications of that SVO demand, we realize it fundamentally distorts how the universe actually operates.
Because reality isn't linear.
Not at all. Think about physical reality, ecology, global economics, or even a simple human argument with your spouse. These things are never linear. They are massively messy, vastly interconnected webs of mutual influence.
In a complex system, there is rarely a single isolated perpetrator or a straight, unbending arrow of action.
Everything is mutually arising, reacting, and interacting simultaneously, but our grammar cannot handle a web.
So what happens?
When we try to explain a complex, multifaceted experience, say a catastrophic failure at work or a breakdown in a relationship, our grammar forces us to artificially extract a single subject and a single object.
We literally have to assign blame or credit or a linear direction of action just to make the sentence grammatically correct and comprehensible to our peers.
We butcher the intricate reality of the situation to fit it into the grammatical sausage machine. By forcing reality to be linguistically clear, we inevitably distort its truth.
It's terrifying when you apply that to, say, our legal system. The entire edifice of Western law is built on this subject-verb-object assumption. The defendant committed the crime.
It strips away the decades of socioeconomic context, the psychological nuance, the environmental factors.
All because the grammatical structure demands a clean narrative of a singular bad actor doing a singular bad thing.
And this brings us to the broader concept of linguistic relativity, or how language actively guides our attention.
Now, we should be careful here. The author isn't claiming that language absolutely rigidly controls our every thought, like some dystopian puppet master.
We aren't automatons. We can learn new languages. We can invent new concepts. We can push back.
But language creates a massive, undeniable cognitive inertia.
Cognitive inertia is an excellent phrase for it. It is entirely about the path of least cognitive resistance.
Right.
If your native language, like English, constantly requires you to specify the exact time an event happened through strict verb tenses, past, present, future, present perfect, your brain develops a deeply ingrained, unconscious habit of paying extremely close attention to chronological time.
You become a time-obsessed culture.
Exactly. If your language requires gendered nouns like French or Spanish, you habitually, automatically categorize the inanimate world through a lens of masculine and feminine.
It is exactly like having invisible road signs erected inside your mind, constantly, quietly directing your cognitive traffic down the exact same familiar highways.
And because we are barreling down those well-paved linguistic highways at 100 miles an hour, We completely miss what falls through the cracks. We speed right past the scenery.
And this brings us to perhaps the most melancholy, poetic part of the essay, the unspeakable.
This is a vital concept.
I want to share a vivid analogy the author uses here because it is properly brilliant. Imagine human experience, your consciousness, as a continuous, beautifully fluid, high-definition film.
Right.
It never stops rolling. It's full of motion, subtle shadows, and infinite nuance. Language, by stark contrast, is a series of discrete, still photographs.
It is a devastatingly accurate image. You can take some absolutely stunning, highly evocative photographs of that film. You can capture brilliant, isolated moments.
But no matter how many thousands of photos you take, no matter how expansive your vocabulary is, you will always, fundamentally, lose the motion.
And it is that continuous motion, the quiet, unnameable spaces between the frames, that makes reality actually true and alive.
Think about human emotion, listener. Think about the last time you felt truly, deeply sad. I'm not talking about dropping your toast. I'm talking about profound grief or heartbreak.
A complex emotional state.
That emotion wasn't just a flat, two-dimensional dictionary definition of sadness, was it? It was a massive, chaotic symphony,
A sudden flash of a childhood memory.
mixed with a very real, physical ache in the center of your chest, a dash of irrational shame, a sudden terror regarding the future, and your overall shifting sense of your place in the universe at that exact second.
It was vast.
And then a colleague sees you looking down and asks, "You all right? How are you?" And you slap the label sad on it. "I'm just a bit sad today."
You flatten the entire towering symphony into a single dull note played on a tin whistle.
And the great tragedy of the human condition is that we trick ourselves into thinking we actually understand our own profound feelings just because we successfully managed to name them.
We mistake the crude label for the transcendent experience. And the cultural impact of this flattening is immense.
How so?
Well, when an entire society only respects, rewards, and validates what can be clearly, logically articulated in standard grammatical sentences, it systematically pushes everything else into the margins.
Intuition, artistic expression.
The deep physical wisdom of the body, profound internal spiritual experiences, all of these resist being neatly photographed by language.
Therefore, a hyperlinguistic society dismisses them.
It labels them as vague or overly dramatic or intellectually weak simply because they do not fit the established syntax.
So, if this cage is so restrictive, if it flattens our deepest emotions and biases, our very perception of cause and effect, why on earth do we put up with it? Why do we stay inside?
Because, as the essay points out, it's a soft prison.
A soft prison because it does not beat us into submission with a stick. It rewards us for our compliance. It uses treats.
This is the insidious, self-sustaining genius of the system.
It is, isn't it? Just look around your office or watch a session of Parliament. Think about who gets promoted to the board. Think about who wins political debates on television.
The smooth talkers.
If you speak smoothly, if you deploy the trendy, bespoke buzzwords with absolute confidence, if you possess the sheer audacity to package impossibly complex, messy geopolitical or economic issues into neat, punchy, three-word conclusions,
Society lavishes praise upon you.
you are called sharp. You are deemed a thought leader. You are considered highly knowledgeable.
We are actively, financially, and socially incentivized every single day of our lives to simplify, compress, and distort reality.
We wander around our lives thinking we are completely wonderfully free because we have tens of thousands of words at our disposal in the dictionary.
But we are entirely confined to the strict boundaries of what is sayable. We are free to roam, but only within the exact dimensions of the cage.
Which brings us to a crucial, highly pragmatic pivot in the author's argument. If this cage is so inherently distorting, if it flattens our reality and limits our empathy, it is incredibly easy for an intellectual to become utterly cynical,
It is deeply tempting to adopt a sort of romantic, bohemian posture.
to wish we could just tear down the cage, escape language entirely, and finally touch pure reality without the dirty filter of words. Oh, I won't lie, I've had that exact fantasy, usually on a Thursday afternoon after back-to-back Zoom calls.
The urge to unplug completely.
The urge to just chuck the laptop and the phone into the Thames, move to a cabin in the woods, and communicate purely through interpretive dance, meaningful eye contact, and perhaps the occasional grunt. Just properly vibe with the raw universe, you know?
It sounds idyllic, especially to the modern, over-communicated ear. But the author rigorously, almost brutally, counters this romantic notion.
Because the threat of pure reality is absolute, it is fatal.
Humans simply cannot survive in primordial chaos. Imagine, for a moment, genuinely experiencing pure reality. A continuous, entirely unedited stream of raw sensory data.
Every single photon of light, every microscopic vibration of sound, every shift in temperature, every texture.
All flooding your brain simultaneously without any linguistic punctuation, filtering, or categorization to hold it back. It would completely paralyze it.
Our nervous systems would be overloaded in a matter of seconds. We would be catatonic.
It'd be like staring into the sun without blinking. Terrifying.
So the ultimate conclusion isn't that we should hate the cage. We actually must love the cage, or at least respect it deeply, because language acts as the ultimate zipper.
It is the fundamental compression algorithm for human survival and sanity.
Precisely. Compression is not a sin. It is a biological necessity.
To take any meaningful action in the physical world, we cannot afford to stop and calculate every single atomic and historical attribute of that table every single time we encounter one.
We must compress the infinite, swirling, overwhelming details of the universe into the neat, manageable, highly distorted concept of table, so we can put our tea down and move on with our day.
The very act of thinking requires these compressed artificial units. Without discrete linguistic units, we don't actually have thoughts as we understand them. We only have a wash of passing, formless feelings.
And a wash of feelings, no matter how profound, is not enough to build a knowledge system, engineer a bridge, or sustain a civilization.
Yes, we must concede that this compression fundamentally distorts the raw truth of the universe. But it is the cheapest, most efficient, most viral format for survival ever evolved.
So if we accept that we need the cage, what does this all mean for us as a society? If you and I are both walking around with these highly distorted, massively compressed linguistic maps in our heads, how do we ever manage to get anything done together?
Yeah, how does society function at all? Society functions because we manage to construct a shared reality. Civilization requires mass synchronization. Now, we don't need to agree on every single philosophical detail of reality, but we desperately, urgently need to be operating from a broadly shared map.
The classic example. If I look at a red traffic light and my internal map interprets it as a mere suggestion, and you look at the same red light and your map interprets it as an absolute command, we're going to crash in the intersection.
Language is the mechanism that ensures we both see a command.
And it goes vastly beyond physical things like traffic lights or tables. Let's look at the massive non-physical concepts that entirely rule our lives. Money, honor, justice, crime, corporate responsibility.
Look around the room you are sitting in right now. You can look on every shelf. Under the sofa, you won't find justice sitting there like a paperweight.
These things simply do not exist in the physical, objective carbon and water world. They aren't rocks or trees or animals. They are pure, invisible, symbolic architectures.
And they are maintained entirely by the tensile strength of human language.
And this is the true, staggering magic trick of human civilization.
If a critical mass of society collectively believes in the linguistic abstract construct of money, it functions exactly, perfectly, as if it were a physical law of reality.
The piece of polymer paper in your wallet or the digital numbers on your banking app possess absolutely no intrinsic physical value. You can't eat them. They can't keep you warm.
But the shared linguistic agreement surrounding them gives them immense, life-altering power.
Think about the concept of crime. This is a dark but vital example. Without language, if someone strikes you, you can feel the physical pain. That is pure reality.
A dog or a horse can feel that same physical pain.
But without language, you cannot abstract that pain. You cannot invent the grand moral concept of a crime. You cannot construct the complex idea of punishment or build a justice system to stop someone from hurting you again tomorrow.
The shared agreements of language are the invisible, load-bearing scaffolding of our entire world.
The cage isn't just trapping us. It is literally the only thing keeping us from absolute, terrifying isolation from one another.
It is the loom that weaves isolated individual consciousnesses into a functioning collective whole. And furthermore, it acts as humanity's external memory drive.
We often boast about human intelligence, our big brains, but our true superpower as a species isn't necessarily our individual processing power.
It's our unprecedented ability to accumulate, store, and pass down complex knowledge across vast expanses of time and countless generations.
It's brilliant. Language allows a child born in a hospital today to start their life armed with the collected, hard-won, blood-soaked wisdom of thousands of years of human trial and error.
They don't have to figure out how to make fire or invent the wheel or discover penicillin from scratch.
Get to stand on the shoulders of linguistic giants.
Hmm.
But And here's the brutal, unavoidable trade-off the essay insists we face. We pay for this culture. We pay for this society.
We pay for this accumulated medical and scientific knowledge with the steep price of experiential distortion. We must accept this transaction.
We willingly give up the pure, raw, terrifying truth of the present moment in order to have a stable, predictable, shared future.
It is a classic Faustian bargain, but an absolutely necessary one for our survival. However, if we accept this premise, if we connect this foundational idea to the bigger picture of modern society, a rather dark, incredibly urgent question emerges.
And this brings us to the power dynamics of the cage.
Because if we accept that language is the essential foundational infrastructure of our entire shared reality,
Then it logically follows that whoever controls that infrastructure holds the ultimate supreme power over human life.
yes. If language is the cage, who exactly holds the keys? Who gets to weld the bars?
And the text has a brilliant, absolutely piercing insight here that should change how you read the news forever. Naming isn't just attaching a neutral descriptive label to a thing.
Naming is the active, aggressive act of distributing sympathy and dictating morality.
The politics of language, it is incredibly subtle, mostly invisible, and terrifyingly effective.
When a news editor or a politician standing at a podium, or even your boss in an email, chooses a specific word to describe an event, they are doing immense ideological heavy lifting before your brain has even consciously processed the end of the sentence.
Let's look deeply at the examples the author provides. And just to be absolutely crystal clear to you listening, we are going to look at these examples strictly clinically, neutrally, purely as an exercise in observing the mechanics of linguistics.
We are not taking a political stance on any specific real-world event here. We are looking at the engine under the bonnet.
Consider the profound difference between a newsroom deciding to call a public gathering a protest versus deciding to call it a riot.
It completely, instantly alters the cognitive landscape of the audience. The word protest inherently implies a democratic right. It suggests a legitimate grievance, civic engagement, perhaps even a certain historical nobility.
It frames the individuals involved as citizens exercising their voice.
The word riot, on the other hand, implies mindless violence, sheer criminality, and dangerous chaos. It frames the exact same individuals as a mob that needs to be controlled.
Imagine being a news editor in a morning meeting, looking at raw footage of a street event. People are shouting, a bin is on fire, police are there. The physical reality on the ground is what it is.
But the moment that editor types protesters clash with police versus rioters attack police into the chyron at the bottom of the screen, they have entirely dictated the nation's response.
The word choice affects whether the public feels sympathy or fear. It affects how aggressive the police response is legally allowed to be. Decades later, it dictates how the event is written into historical textbooks, all from one word.
We see the exact same mechanism in policy, calling a government action a reform versus calling it a destruction or a gutting.
Reform sounds progressive, necessary, clinical, like a doctor fixing a patient.
Destruction sounds malicious and chaotic, or on an interpersonal level, labeling someone a victim versus labeling them weak.
The physical facts of what happened to that person could be entirely identical, but the name applied to those facts dictates your moral judgment of them before you've even had time to think critically for yourself.
It makes you realize that winning a social debate or a national political campaign, or even just an argument with a rival department in a boardroom, is rarely about marshaling the best empirical facts.
Facts are almost secondary. It is almost entirely about winning the right to define the dictionary being used in the room.
If I can convince you to adopt my vocabulary, to argue using my terms, I have already won the argument before you've opened your mouth.
And the tragic consequence of this power dynamic is a deeply unfair division in society between what the author astutely calls valid realities and laughed-at realities.
This is the subtle, pervasive oppression of making certain expressions, certain ways of speaking or feeling seem socially shameful.
This is where the cage gets cool. If someone possesses a deep psychological trauma or a profound inner spiritual experience, but society hasn't provided a serious academically or medically approved vocabulary for it, that very real experience is violently pushed to the fringes.
It becomes illegitimate.
It is awful.
Yeah.
Because if an individual cannot articulate their profound pain or their profound joy in the proper socially sanctioned format, two things happen.
Either it remains entirely silent and therefore gets completely forgotten and ignored by society, leaving the person in isolation.
Or the pressure builds until it erupts as a massive, inarticulate, perhaps physical outburst.
And we all know what happens when it erupts. The people sitting comfortably in power, the people who own the dictionary, just point at the outburst and say, look at that. Look how dramatic, how extremist, how unhinged they are.
They entirely dismiss the underlying reality of the pain because they find the vocabulary messy and unpalatable.
We see this exact dynamic clearly when we look at how the standardization of language acts as a ruthless class filter. We touched on this earlier regarding schools and state administration.
The standard dialect acts as a massive, invisible gatekeeper.
Society constantly, arrogantly confuses speaking standardly with thinking correctly.
Think about the UK. Think about how we historically, and often currently, treat people with thick regional dialects. A strong Geordie accent, or Scouse, or working-class vernacular.
Or think about people who stutter, or people who simply struggle to articulate themselves quickly under pressure. They are routinely and wildly unfairly deemed less intelligent, less capable.
The cognitive cage we've been talking about suddenly hardens into a literal economic, social cage. It locks brilliant people out of job opportunities, it disadvantages them in legal representation, it prevents them from being taken seriously in the public square.
It is a prejudice so deeply baked into our institutions, so woven into the fabric of the cage, that we rarely even acknowledge it as prejudice. We just give it a polite name. We call it demanding professionalism.
And this linguistic detachment culminates in what the essay identifies as a terrifying modern phenomenon.
Yeah.
Bureaucratic violence. This is the complete, chilling divorce of linguistic symbols from physical human reality.
Bureaucratic violence. This is when what is right in language detaches entirely from what is right in life.
Have you ever worked at a massive corporation where the executive team rolls out a new policy, and on paper, in the beautifully formatted all-staff email, it sounds utterly fantastic?
It uses all the right, morally unassailable buzzwords. It talks about optimizing wellness, empowering stakeholders, streamlining synergies.
Logically and grammatically, it is a perfect document.
But in physical reality, when that perfectly worded policy is actually applied to the human beings working on the factory floor or in the call center, it operates like an absolute meat grinder.
It crushes the people trapped inside the system. It destroys their work-life balance or strips their autonomy.
Yes. But because the email used the words optimizing wellness, the executives feel virtuous.
We literally hypnotize ourselves with good wording. We look at a beautifully drafted government law or a slick corporate mandate, and we feel intellectually and morally satisfied whilst completely ignoring the actual physical suffering it is causing on the ground.
We worship the polished symbol, and we sacrifice the messy human being on its altar.
It is a chilling, sobering observation. And, frankly, if we were to leave the analysis right there, we would be leaving you, the listener, in a very dark, deeply paranoid place.
You'd be afraid to open your mouth or read a newspaper.
But thankfully, the essay doesn't stop at deconstruction. It moves forward, offering highly practical metalinguistics for the individual. It asks, how do we expand our cage?
Okay, let's take a collective deep breath here, because the author is not suggesting you abandon words, quit your job, and go live off-grid. The fantasy of escaping the cage is rubbish.
You cannot unlearn language.
Yeah.
Once the lens is in your eye, it is there for good.
The goal, as the author clearly states, is not to smash the cage. As we established, that would lead to cognitive madness and isolation. The goal is simply to realize you are inside one.
It is about upgrading your daily awareness of the frame. It is about becoming conscious.
Step 1 in the essay's practical guide: seeing the frame. Because, as the author brilliantly points out, intelligent people aren't usually fooled by outright obvious lies.
If someone tells you the sky is green, you don't believe them.
We are fooled by the things we don't even realize we believe. We are trapped by the unquestioned assumptions embedded deep within our daily vocabulary.
The practice here is creating a moment of hesitation. The moment you can pause in the middle of a heated, stressful argument, whether it's about politics online or who should do the washing up at home, and ask yourself, wait, am I actually arguing about physical reality here, or am I just arguing about a label?
You gain an immense liberating distance. You start to realize that massive concepts you fight over, freedom, fairness, success, loyalty, aren't physical objects you can hold in your hand.
They are fragile, highly subjective agreements. Recognizing that simple fact stops you from fighting phantoms. You stop trying to prove your definition is physically real and start negotiating the shared agreement.
Step 2 is about intentionally diversifying your inputs. Multilingualism and multi-format living. Now, learning a new language is obviously brilliant.
It isn't just about memorizing enough vocabulary so you can order a croissant on your holiday in France without looking like a fool.
It is literally physically learning a new way to cut up reality. It shatters the arrogant default illusion that your native English way of thinking is the only natural or correct way to perceive the universe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the author provides a brilliant, highly practical caveat for those of us who realistically do not have the time or resources to become fluent in Mandarin or Arabic.
Even if you only ever speak one language your entire life, you must actively, aggressively consume multiple formats of that language.
Yes. Do not let the Silicon Valley algorithm dictate your cognitive diet. Because if you only ever consume short, punchy tweets, snappy Instagram captions, and 2-minute, highly edited rage-bait videos, your mental cage will inevitably biologically shrink to fit that exact tiny algorithm.
Your thoughts will become 280 characters long.
You must force your brain to digest long, chewy, complex realities. Read dense, difficult science. Read opaque, frustrating poetry. Read heavy, sprawling philosophy. Read someone's chaotic, unedited personal diary.
Stretch the physical dimensions of your cognitive cage by actively exposing it to vastly different architectural styles of thought.
Step 3 involves the active use of neologisms, which is just a posh academic way of saying inventing entirely new words and metaphors.
Stretching the cage from the inside out. Language, thankfully, is inherently elastic. When humanity encounters something truly unprecedented, a new technology like the internet, a novel social dynamic, a new kind of economic crisis, we intuitively invent metaphors to stretch our existing vocabulary to fit over it.
We coin new terms, but I want to inject a massive cautionary note here, playing devil's advocate to the idea that inventing words is always good. Because inventing new words is a cognitive superpower, yes, but it can also be a devastating weapon, can't it?
It can indeed, and we must be incredibly vigilant. Creating new labels can be a tool for profound social manipulation.
As we discussed with the newsroom examples, a new word can normalize terrible, destructive things by giving them a clinical, friendly, bureaucratic name.
Conversely, it can demonize perfectly normal, benign behaviors by wrapping them in sudden, sinister vocabulary. When you hear a new buzzword enter the cultural zeitgeist, you must be deeply critical.
You must ask, who is introducing this new word, and what are they trying to make me feel by using it?
Always mind the gap between the shiny new word and the messy physical reality.
Moving on to step 4, which I found deeply moving. Honoring the unspeakable. We must intentionally fiercely make room in our busy lives for the things that simply cannot be compressed into standard English sentences.
This is where we must engage with art. True art, whether it's a painting, a piece of instrumental music, or abstract sculpture, doesn't attempt to rigidly define reality. It suggests, it gestures, it points deliberately to the vast silent spaces between the words.
Furthermore, we must learn to listen to our physical bodies. The sudden tension in your shoulders during a meeting, the deep exhaustion in your bones that coffee can't fix, the sudden, unexplainable feeling of peace in your chest when walking in the woods.
These physical realities possess a profound, unassailable truth, and crucially, that truth does not require verbal justification or a logical subject-verb-object structured argument to be valid.
And part of honoring the unspeakable is embracing intentional silence. We live in a world that is constantly, aggressively screaming at you to have an opinion on every breaking news story, to post your thoughts, to join the conversation, to build your personal brand.
Sometimes the most radical, powerful, and intellectually honest thing you can possibly do is just shut up.
Silence is a valid response. Silence is a way to protect a living, breathing, complex truth from being flattened into a cheap, disposable slogan.
Finally, we arrive at step 5, practical habit changes. This is where the abstract philosophy meets the pavement of your daily life.
This is a direct challenge to you listening to this right now. The language habits you use every single day literally become your life habits. They build the world you live in.
If you constantly rely on quick, absolute terminal labels, if you are always calling a colleague toxic, calling a new idea stupid, calling a complex situation wrong, full stop, you're going to live your entire life in a very flat, very hostile, very combative world.
You are actively building a tiny, sharp, miserable cage for yourself.
The practical alternative is to practice, consciously and deliberately, shifting to descriptive, provisional language. It requires pausing. Instead of declaring, he is toxic, try framing it as, when he does X, I feel Y.
Instead of stating this entire project is wrong, try saying, the current conditions seem to indicate that.
Instead of the arrogant I know, Try the much more intellectually honest. I'm not entirely sure yet, but it appears to me.
Now, I grant you, it slows you down.
Hmm.
It takes considerably more faff. It certainly doesn't sound as punchy or authoritative on social media. You won't go viral for being provisional.
But my goodness, it gives your personal reality profound depth. It allows the other people in your life to exist as complex, multidimensional, flawed human beings rather than flat, two-dimensional villains in your personal narrative.
It allows you to actually inhabit the world, to be present in it, rather than just rapidly categorizing it and dismissing it.
So after all of this, what does this actually mean for us tomorrow morning? Let's draw this sprawling conversation together with the final, absolutely brilliant metaphor from the author's essay.
Language is a room with a window. The window allows you to see the outside world, which is wonderful, but the glass itself fundamentally, permanently changes the color, the angle, and the shape of the light that comes in.
You cannot smash the glass. If you smash the window, you let in the howling, blinding chaos of pure reality, and you lose the ability to see stably at all.
You absolutely need the glass to survive. But you must remember to occasionally clean the glass. You must scrub away the cliches and the inherited biases.
You must sometimes walk across the room and open a different window to look out from a completely new angle.
And above all else, every single day, you must never ever forget that you are looking through glass. Do not mistake the artificial tint of the window for the true color of the sun.
It's a beautiful, grounding thought. But before we let you go to mull all of this over, I have one final, slightly haunting provocation to leave you with. A thought that builds on everything we've discussed, but takes it one step further into the future.
Go on then.
We've spent this entire time talking about the human agreement of language. The cage built slowly, over millennia, by our ancestors, by hunting tribes, by ancient scribes, by kings, and by modern societies.
Yes.
But right now, at this exact moment in history, we are crossing a massive threshold. We are entering an era where artificial intelligence is generating a massive and rapidly growing portion of the text, the emails, the news articles, and the executive summaries we read every single day.
It's everywhere now.
If we accept the premise that language is the fundamental infrastructure of our shared reality, what happens when we outsource the building of that infrastructure to machines? If algorithms and AI are generating the words, whose cuts of reality are we unknowingly adopting?
Whose cage are we walking into tomorrow?
Exactly.
Well, there is a proper spanner in the works to keep you up at night.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Well, I think that is quite enough deep existential thinking for one day. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. As you go about your day tomorrow, getting your morning coffee, sitting in those endless meetings, or just chatting with your mates at the pub, just pay a little bit of extra attention to the labels you are casually throwing around. Notice the glass you are looking through. Have a brilliant week, mind the gap, and we will catch you next time.